In 1980, two UFO incidents occurred in the Rendlesham forest in England. Was it real or a hoax? Listen in and find out. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another, I'm always forgetting what podcast we're doing. This one's Speaking of Spirits, but I do have Deacon's artwork from Nightmare Road on. Yes. Yes. So anyway, we're doing Speaking of Spirits today. And before we get into it anyway, I wanted to show you, because we're doing a UFO topic, that I have my UFO campground UTV mug from the campground right next to Skinwalker Ranch. So, nicest people in the world. Want to give a shout out to them. They're amazing.
I got my Bigfoot mug.
Yay! I like that one. That's awesome. Yeah, so, and I was watching, I don't know, you guys need to head over, if you're on Speaking of Spirits, head on over to Nightmare Road too, because you and Decon did a wrestling show for Decon versus the Dark.
Yeah, wrestling conspiracies. Yeah, that was a hoot. It kind of went off the rails, but we brought it back. So
I loved it, because I'm not into wrestling at all, and it was a great show. I loved it.
Oh man, my family. Well, when my grandparents were here, that was a constant up at their house on Sunday nights. Was go up there, and Grandpa had wrestling on at what was it, 4, sometime in the afternoon, but it was a constant thing. And yeah, I remember all the old classic guys, Randy Savage, the $1 Million Man, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, all those guys, yeah. And fun fact, my grandpa used to ref the matches that used to come here way back before WWE. Yeah, when there was only 2 factions that used to run the country, yeah.
Wow.
Way back.
That's cool. That's funny that it was your grandpa. My grandma she watched wrestling, but I never really watched it with her. But the thing that we watched constantly was the roller derby.
Oh, I remember those.
Those girls were tough, man.
Oh, that was a thing. And it used to come and go. It used to be on for a while, and then it would disappear, and then a couple of years later, it would come back.
Yeah. It was really big in the late 60s through the 70s. Really a big thing. And then, like you said, I don't know where it went. And then we have a local team here, roller derby girls. So it's pretty cool.
I went and saw a live match. Oh God, it had to be like 10 years ago or more. And that was really? If you've never seen a live roller derby thing, a roller derby match, you got to check one out. They're so fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I'd like to see it, because they're tough, man. Those girls are really, really tough. I couldn't do it. I can sit on any bucking horse trying to spin me off, and I'm fine. But you put me on a set of skates, and I can't go 5 feet without falling. So,
nope. Yeah, you and me both. But speaking of UFOs, did you get that message I sent you about the
I need to
radio signal that came out?
Yeah, I want to take a look at that. Yeah, so we're talking about. I haven't seen it yet, Kelly, but I'm going to definitely dive into that one today and see what's going on. But so today we have
supposed to go down. It's supposed to go down tonight. So in the forest of Montana, south of Great Falls.
It's really interesting. So what exactly is supposed to happen?
Intergalactic dogmen are supposed to come down and land there.
Okay. Well, I guess keep your eyes peeled and we'll see if that happens. Dogmen. Okay.
If they show up, I'm packing up and I'm leaving. I didn't.
So we're talking about a UFO incident today, and we're talking about the Rendlesham UFO incident. And so this is in England at an Air Force base, in the community around the Air Force base and the Air Force base.
2 Air Force bases.
It's 2 Air Force bases.
Yeah, it's smack dab in the middle of it.
So we have the British Air Force base and the American. right?
I think, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, they're basically side by side, I think, from what it looks like on Google Maps. So, is that correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, and what do you know that it was December 1980? So we have December 26th was the first sighting. December 28th was the second sighting. But it started on the 26th when the U.S. military people saw strange lights above the forest surrounding the Air Force Base.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
They reported seeing a red and blue flashing lights and a craft that looked like it was crashing in the forest. They thought it was a downed aircraft.
So just to give you a perspective, if for this, you have two runways right here. So these are probably the two bases, right? And then this is really farmed out now. But I imagine in 1980, it probably was a lot more wooded. So this is obviously you can tell fence lines and everything else, but it looks like from the photos that I've looked at from the period 1980, this was more heavily forested. So yeah, so we have RAF Bentwater. It's an air base used by the U.S. Air Force during the Cold War until about 1993. And then we have U.S. Air Force personnel stationed there. And then you have, is it Rendlesham Air Base for England?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. So they're seeing lights in the sky. They're trying to figure out what it is. So you have a guy named Nick Pope. He was the Ministry of Defense employee, and from 1985 to 2006. So, and he wrote a book called Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, the inside story of the world's best documented UFO incident. So that book is out there if you want to read more. Everybody's like, look, this was not just lights in the sky. This happened. Okay. So you have a U.S. Air Force officer who was the first person, I think, who left to investigate the incident. And his name was John Burroughs. And there's a forest around the base and there's also farms. And he described the farm animals being really, really agitated, like nervous, agitated, upset. So he described all of that. And he said that the lights weren't just above the airbase in the sky. They went through the tree. The lights went through the trees. So, and he described them as what? Blue, red, orange, and white lights?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. He published a witness statement in 1981, and he said, the woods light up and you could hear farm animals making a lot of noises. You could see the lights down by the farmer's house on the edge of the forest. And we climbed over the fence and started walking towards the red and blue lights, and then they just disappeared. So, then there's Jim Penniston, an officer who went to investigate as well. So they hustle and they're told to go investigate this because what's going on, right? This is Cold War. I mean, is this the Russians coming in? I mean, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah, it could have been very, very dangerous, especially back then during the Cold War when everybody had their finger ready to push that button.
Yeah, it was really a tense time. Like anything that happened out on international waters, anything that happened anywhere, people got really agitated, right? Because you just didn't know what was going to happen. So Penniston went with Burroughs, and he described seeing a craft. So they get to like the area in the forest where where the lights disappeared, and they see this craft, and they described it as a craft covered in hieroglyphic
Yeah, it's a hard word. It's a hard word early in the morning. Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics, like characters. And he said this statement. I estimated it to be 3 meters tall and about 3 meters wide at the base.
So
No
for our
landing.
American friends, that's almost 10 feet. 10 feet by 10 feet.
Thank you. Yeah. I always have to get out my calculator and do the conversion. Thanks. No landing gear was apparent, but it seemed like she, and remember, this is a military, crafts are always female. So ships are
Yep.
female, airplanes are female. It seemed like she was on fixed legs. I moved a little closer. I walked around the craft and finally I walked right up to it. I noticed the fabric on the shell was more like smooth, opaque black glass.
Yep.
Fascinating.
That's actually the second time I've heard of something like this.
Really?
Yeah. It's. I think it's some type of camouflage. And I don't know about anybody else out there, but you run into it. If you ever find a UFO just parked in the forest, don't touch it.
Oh, shit. No. So the morning after the incident witnessed by Burroughs and Peniston, indentations on the forest floor were spotted, as well as damage to the trees in the area. Because remember, this thing's flying through the forest. So it's breaking branches, it's snapping branches off of as it's flying through the trees. So at this point, I imagine it's gone, right?
Yeah.
It left.
Yeah. And early in the morning, they went back and they took plaster casts of these quote unquote landing spots. And they commented that it made like almost a perfect triangle. So
That's interesting. And they also come out this time during the day with Geiger counters.
yep.
And they find radiation levels. So again, don't touch it.
Varying radiation levels, but the closer they got to the landing spot is where it spiked.
Yeah. So I don't know. Did anything ever happen to Peniston from touching it?
Yes, they
He
both
did.
got what is that word? See, I'm having trouble talking too. They got they got radiation poisoning.
They did. That's what I
Yep.
wondered. God dang. So December 20, that was the 26th. The 27th, they go out to investigate, right? And, or was that the 26th, right? The first, yeah, 26th. So then the 27th, they go out and investigate. So this is the next night. And this is when Colonel Holt went out. Holt or Halt?
Holt.
Holt.
Yeah.
And he did a running commentary, I guess, during the second UFO sighting at Rendlesham. So they've been investigating, and then so that's the 26th, the 28th, they have another incident.
Yeah, it came back. Somebody ran to a shindig they were having on base, some award ceremony or something like that, and the guy pulls Holt aside, and he's like, "It's back." And he's like, "What's back?" And he's like, "The UFO, sir." And he's like, "Okay, we got to shut this down." So he grabs a small crew and heads out there.
Yeah, so some of these photos that I'm going to show during the podcast are the photos that they took of the landing site and them investigating in the forest there. So this is allegedly the landing site, although, I mean, the photo quality isn't very good. But so they go out and there's numerous eyewitnesses coming in during this time, right? Because you have the two incidences. So you have Burroughs, Peniston, and Holt have been the most vocal, saying that they believe what they saw was extraterrestrial. They said, "Look, this is not normal." But they're not the only eyewitnesses. You have Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, who he was a security police officer for the base, and he went to investigate as well. And when he said, when I arrived at the scene, It was going in and out through the trees. So the thing was still moving at the time. So this guy's probably on patrol, sees this, takes off, trying to follow it, right? And he said at one stage, this UFO's hovering. So it could have been when it was trying to land. So, and then you have another witness saying, now this is kind of funny because you have other witnesses and from the base and the surrounding areas saying, look, there's no UFO. It was the beacon at the lighthouse. Now let's show Google Maps again. All right. So the beacon is way over here, Oxfordness Beacon at the lighthouse. Okay. It's not that far as a crow flies, but beacons are very distinguishable. Can you guys see the beacon?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
There we
You
are.
see it? There you are. Okay. Here's the beacon and here's the runways for the two bases, right? And look, anybody who's been around a beacon, an airport beacon, a lighthouse beacon, it's a strobe that goes around and around. And there's no way that can be confused with lights flying through the forest. And particularly because the beacon light going around, it's on a fixed circular pattern. I mean, how can anybody confuse that?
It doesn't make sense. If anybody's been around, what are they called? Canister lights, like a movie premiere or something like that in Hollywood. They spin. They're huge. They're huge. They send just a beam of light in the sky, and they just spin around, and they're stationary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't confuse that with something that's actually almost ground level and moving through the woods, and then hovering up in the sky, and they've got different colored lights. That is not a lighthouse. I'm sorry.
Now, if that would have happened now, like right now, today's technology, I would say maybe it could have been a drone. I don't know did we have drone technology in 1980? Maybe.
Yeah, you're getting into conspiracy territory now, but I don't think so.
But even so, well, I don't know. That's a whole line of did we? Because that falls into the military conspiracy stuff, right? Yeah. So anyway, you have the beacon and you have the forest. And then there was other eyewitnesses that said, look, it was just a lit up farmhouse. I don't know what everybody's talking about. To me, this sounds like people who refuse, like their brain can't handle what could possibly be happening. So they go to something really mundane and write it off and just say, no, it's beacon. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, that very well could have been what's happening with these witnesses.
Yeah. In the South, they call it, no, you didn't.
Yeah. So here's another image that I'm going to show of, oops, sorry guys. Sometimes I do really good at this and sometimes I don't. So I'm going to share this screen again. And here's another picture that shows the depression in the ground of, do you see the leg? Like the bottom? Yeah, left is the depression in the ground from where this thing landed. So it sunk in. It was heavy enough to sink into the ground. So, I mean, forest floors are not hard and compact typically. There's a lot of debris and pine needles and duff on the floor. So it's squishy.
It's also December in England. So I'm guessing everything is wet.
Yeah, probably. It does
wet and squishy. So yeah, it's going to leave a decent impression in the ground.
Yeah. So Colonel Holt is saying, look, this is extraterrestrial. Statements from radar operators have recently corroborated Holt's claims. Right? They said, look, Holt went out and he talked to the radar operators, right? Because he's colonel, he's the bird of the base. So they talked to radar operators at RAF Bentwaters near Rendlesham Airfield, and they did track this object, but they didn't know what it was. And they said, he writes, Halt, I have confirmation that Bentwater's radar operators saw the object go across their 60-mile scope in 2 or 3 seconds. That's fast. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's thousands of miles an hour. He came back across their scope again and stopped near the water tower. And then they watched it go on their scope into the forest where we were.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
The radar operators at the time thought it was a prank by the SAS. So they wrote it off. They were just like, it's a fluke, it's a bogey, and they just wrote it off as something strange. But it crossed their radar screen in 3 seconds.
Yeah. Well, you see a lot. So with radar screens, you can identify birds, you can identify hang gliders, you can identify a lot. It's just noise on a radar scope, right? It's just noise. So in the control tower and in the radar operations where I worked in both environments in the Navy. You have a scope and it goes out to however many miles you need it, that it's calibrated to go out to, right? And birds look like white clutter. It's just clutter, right? But you can see movement. But even when we had jets coming in to the airfield, fast, they're not covering that kind of distance. They're just not. So that's huge. So, later they get to thinking, well, they put the pieces together and they're like, okay, well, what these guys saw in the forest aligns with what we saw in the scope. So then it's not a prank, right? So today they have like this UFO trail. If you go out there, you can hike it, you can get in there and see where this incident took place. And then in 2015, it's kind of interesting that there was a guy that was walking his dog in the forest, and he posted a fresh video of UFO footage again that just happened. So what is it about this area that's drawing activity? I don't know.
It's probably something underground, I'm guessing. Or it's, maybe it's just like, I don't know, maybe an airport for them to refuel or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going on out there about these incidents, and they don't know. You have local farmers that are seeing this stuff. You have the military personnel that are seeing this stuff. You've got a lot of eyes on this thing. It's not 1 or 2 people. It's kind of like the Phoenix Lights incident. You got thousands of people seeing that.
Yep.
So something is going on. Just because we can't describe it and we don't know what it is doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Exactly.
A lot of people believe, it was caused by a meteor or atmospheric distortions. Others suggest it was caused, again, by the lighthouse. There are suggestions now of government cover-up, like, let's see, Halt. There's an audio recording that you can go online and find from Colonel Halt, and they've released the audio recording, and it's quite long, but you can release it, and it's his describing what he saw, what they saw when they went out there. And some people, Halt absolutely believes it was extraterrestrial. He's like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts in his mind. But the Ministry of Defense in England believes that it was absolutely no threat to security, to national security, and it didn't merit a full investigation. And I call BS on that. You know darn well they investigated it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like this, they put everybody involved through the ringer.
Yeah. Come on. The whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to put up another map so you guys can see locations a little better. Here we go. And so here is how everything's laid out there. So There is absolutely no way that England and the United States didn't investigate that. We know they did. People have now, who were involved with the investigation, have written books. You have Peniston's account. You have Burroughs' account about what this thing looked like. I guess what, nobody saw it lift off?
No, nobody's. Well, they got close. Well, they were approaching it the first time, and of course, he touched it, and then it lifted up and it took off from there. So.
Oh, so they did see it take off.
They did see it take off.
Okay. I haven't read. I know that you got a book and you've been reading the book, but I haven't read the book. Excuse me. So yeah, that makes sense because you would think that they would have had personnel stationed around it the whole time, like they wouldn't just leave. So yeah.
Yeah, there was only a handful of guys that the first time around, and they got close. Of course, one of them touched the damn thing, and it was like that ship was like, "Oh God, people," and it took off. And those poor.
Do you remember when you read the account of it leaving? Did it make any noise?
No, completely silent.
And there was no like exhaust or anything?
No.
So that's what's so interesting about stuff like this, right? Is that, obviously we have drone technology, but they're not silent. Now we do. They're not silent because there's a system that operates this thing that's creating flight. So they're not silent.
No, there's a theory out there that they've got some kind of material that they can use that generates a gravitational field around the craft, and then they just bend space and gravity, and that's what gives them propulsion, and they can go anywhere they want. It's in Star Trek.
Well, it's really interesting. All of this stuff is fascinating to me, and maybe someday, maybe tonight, we'll know, right? Yeah. So if the dogmen show up in Montana.
That was such a bizarre message. It's fun to think about. Probably nothing will happen, but if it does, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it. It was Rendlesham has always been kind of it's a really interesting thing. You have the military who observed it. You have a lot of people who observed it. This wasn't a hoax. You have people who were really shook up about what they saw, and
those poor guys. They got put through the ringer. They got PTSD.
Well, think about it too, because the military stifled them from saying things. So all of their adult lives, they're told you can't say anything, and it wasn't until I don't know when they started putting those books out, but it wasn't right after the incident.
Yeah.
So
they had to they had to be hush hush for so long. It was probably, my guess is like they're getting towards the end of things, and they're like, you know what? I've only got 10 years to live. I'm spilling my guts. What are they going to do?
Right. Yep. Well, thanks everybody for watching us. Please like and subscribe. We need the subscribers. We need you to share our videos. Catch us on Speaking of Spirits right here on the Pocatello Paranormal Research YouTube page. We're also sharing our videos over on Nightmare Road, and we may be condensing the podcast. We're not quite sure how we're going to work that, but right now we really enjoy Speaking of Spirits. It might all fall under Nightmare Road, but we're going to keep making content for you. We hope you enjoyed it. Signing off.
Good night, everybody.
You've been listening to Speaking of Spirits, powered by Pocatello Paranormal Research in Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do us a favor and go to whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on and give us a review. We prefer the 5-star reviews. This helps us know how we're doing, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next podcast.